This is Abby with the Heirloom Farmer. This is video 3 of the Attainable Garden video series. If you did not see videos 1 and 2, I highly recommend you go back and watch those, and then I'll see you back here for this video. If you've already seen those videos and you've been going, gardening along with me, I am super excited, and today we are going to actually create our garden bed. Now, it's pretty windy out here, so hopefully the videoing goes okay and we don't get too much noise from the wind or things blowing around, but otherwise it is a beautiful day to be out here creating our attainable garden space. Now, I highly recommend that you do this part of the process in April. You can do this anytime. However, if you do this in April, there are a couple benefits. So this will allow time for the weeds to be suppressed, or whatever was growing in your garden space to be suppressed, and the organic matter can start incorporating into the soil and feeding your soil. It will also give the cardboard or paper layer a little bit of time to start to do its job and then break down so that the roots of what we're going to plant can go down into the native soil. And also, we are going to start planting at the end of April if you're planting along with me. So you're going to want to have your garden bed prepared in April if possible. If you're doing this a different time of year, that's okay. Just know that you may not be planting the same things at the same time, and you may need to give it a little bit more time to get established. All right, so we have gone over the project supply list in past videos, and we selected our garden site in the last video as well. Now, one thing I did want to add about site selection that I don't think I mentioned last week was having access to a water source. So you do want to think about having a water source or being able to run a hose to your garden location for bed preparation and for watering your plants as needed. Because of how we're creating our garden bed, they shouldn't need much water. However, if we have a really dry period, or if you're establishing plants during a dry and hot period, it can be important to water. So I do encourage you to consider having access to water at your garden site. All right, now today, like I said, we're gonna actually build the garden bed. So you're gonna wanna have your supplies collected first. And you may wanna, spend some time collecting your supplies several days before you actually build the garden bed. That way, once you come to build it, you have everything you need and it can be a really smooth process. So we are gonna go over everything you need for this part of the process. And if you have any questions, let me know, and then we're going to get started. So I do recommend that you find hay or straw or collect a bunch of leaves from your yard. You're also going to want to have your compost ready. You do want to make sure that it's well composted and organic compost. This is mushroom compost that I'm going to be using, and you're going to need about half a yard, which is more than I have pictured here. I could just only fit this amount in my wagon at a time. If you are struggling to find compost or struggling to have a way to haul your compost, I do talk about some of those options in the first video and in the blog post, but let me know if you have questions about finding the right amount of compost or the right style of compost. But you really don't want to skimp on your compost. This is a pretty important part of the process. Okay, hopefully that wind calms down. It's like really gusting right now. Also, it can be helpful to have a shovel and a rake for this part of the process, and have a hose available for watering as we go, especially if you're doing this on a windy day like I am. It can be helpful to have the hose ready so that the water can help hold down your cardboard and straw, and that will also help start the process of breaking those things down. Now, I want to explain a little bit of the process. I'm not going to get too much into the science of this because I do want to keep this as a pretty basic, easy gardening video series. But basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to make a layer of cardboard or paper, and that's going to smother out the existing plants and their roots, and they will start to die off and decompose and actually feed into the soil. And we want to have a very thick layer so that they cannot get the sun and things that they need to survive, and that will kill off and suppress any unwanted plants. This is also going to make maintaining our garden bed a lot easier. We won't have to do as much frustrating weeding by doing the process this way. The hay or straw or leaves is also going to add organic matter to the soil, help feed your soil, feed your plants, and it's going to be another barrier to help suppress the weeds. So that's kind of what we're doing, is we're suppressing the weeds, but we're also feeding the soil, which then in turn is going to feed our plants. Okay. The wind is not cooperating, but that's okay. It's still a beautiful day out here to be building a garden. So once you have everything collected, it is time to construct your garden bed. And I'm going to explain the process, and then I'm going to set the camera down so that you can actually watch me build my garden. So we measured out our 4x8 space last week, and what we're going to do first is we're going to take the cardboard or newspaper, depending on what you're using, and we're going to lay it out to fully cover the section we marked out, and if you have space, go an additional 6 inches to a foot over that, and that's what's going to become our edge and our weed barrier along the edge of our garden. And you'll see how I do that throughout the video. So we're going to do the cardboard first, and then we're going to do the hay or straw or leaves, but I'll come back and explain that when we get to that point of the video. All right, now if the wind does not blow my tripod over, we will be good to go. I am gonna go ahead and put down the cardboard. I do recommend removing any tape or plastic from the cardboard, staples, anything like that if it's in your cardboard before you put it down, and have your hose ready so that you can wet down the cardboard as you go and prevent it from blowing away. All right, let's go. Alright, so I have the cardboard laid out, and as you can see it took a lot of cardboard, but that's okay. This is a good use for cardboard and paper that typically is wasted. So I put down a good layer of cardboard, and you really want to make sure that everything's covered and that there's no gaps. And with cardboard, there's often gaps like this, so that's where you want to do double layers so that there's no gaps in the cardboard. You really want to get a good layer that's going to smother everything that was underneath. And as you can see, I went a little bit outside of the 4x8 space because that will become the edge of our garden. Now we're going to take our straw bale, in my case, but you can use straw, hay, or leaves. I will say that straw and hay are going to be the easiest to apply compared to leaves, but you can certainly use leaves if that's what you have available to you. If you use hay or straw, you just want to make sure that it has not been sprayed with herbicides. The best way to find that out is to simply ask the farmer that you're buying from if they use any herbicides on their fields. We do not, so I can confidently use our hay and straw on my garden. I'm going to show you quickly over here our mulched garden. This is a combination of hay and straw. I've grown things in here, so I know that, again, I double know that it's safe. And sometimes people have concerns about hay sprouting. I've not experienced that. You can see this section here is all hay. That's where we have our garlic planted, and none of that has germinated. I do have it in a pretty thick layer, so I think that helps. But I do, use a lot of hay and straw in our garden very successfully. So depending on what you're using, you're just going to do a fairly light layer around your actual garden bed, and this is going to just provide another barrier to smother the weeds, and it's going to provide organic matter for your soil. And then you're going to use a heavier layer around the outside edge that is going to be your bed edge. That's going to prevent this grass and clover from creeping into your bed so quickly. So I will show you how I'm going to do that, and then we will come back and chat about adding our compost. All right, now I have applied our layer of straw. I did it very lightly in the center where we're actually doing our garden bed, so that 4x8 foot section, and then pretty heavily around the outside. That's gonna create our edge. Now what we're gonna do, and then I wet it down with the hose, partly to help prevent it from blowing away, but also to start adding moisture and help that organic matter start to break down and feed the soil. So I did that with, I put the cardboard down and wet it, then I put the straw down and I wet it. Now we're gonna put the compost down. So compost is often where people have the most frustrations, confusion, barriers. Maybe you feel like you don't have access to compost, you can't haul compost, you don't know what type of compost to use. So if you have those questions, please comment below or send me a message directly. I'm happy to help, but I just use organic mushroom compost. We have it here at the farm, and that's what we use on a large scale. We use it in our gardens. We've had very good success with it, and we do have it available for purchase. However, you can find farmers and garden stores in your area that have compost available. And you just want to find something that is organic and well composted. if you do have concerns about your compost being contaminated or potentially being hot, maybe you have your own compost or you got compost from a neighbor and you're just not 100% confident in it, one thing that you can do is bring some inside where it can warm up a little bit and then plant some bean seeds in it. Doesn't matter what kind of bean seeds. Any type of bean seed, bush bean will work. Plant some of those beans in it, water it, give it a little bit of light, and allow them to grow. And they should germinate pretty quickly and start to grow healthy bean plants. If there's anything wrong with your compost, beans are going to show signs of issues the fastest. That's why I recommend you use beans. So if they start to die off, or their leaves are all curled or super yellow, or they just look weird, then you might want to be concerned about your compost and have it tested. But if your beans grow just fine, then you have nothing to worry about. All right. So I'm going to start applying the compost to the 4x8 section. We're not going to apply it to the outer edge. We're just going to leave the straw there. We're applying the compost to that 4x8 section. That's why I left my rocks on there. But once I apply the compost, then I'll be removing the rocks. So let's get started. All right, so we have some equipment operating in the background. Hopefully it's not too loud. It is a busy day here on the farm and a beautiful day now that the wind has sort of calmed down. I wasn't able to film the entire time I was putting down compost, but I did get the compost put down, and it took me 5 wagon loads, which is about let's see, a little under 25-gallon buckets of compost. So if you're hauling in 5-gallon buckets, you're going to need about 20 of those. It's about half a yard of compost, which is a common measurement. And if you go to a garden store or hardware store, it's going to be about 10 bags if they're like the large bags. I'll put the exact measurement in a blog post. Gonna pause here while the equipment goes by. So I have all of the compost down and it's pretty thick. It's like 4 to 8 inches thick, and you really want it to be thick. You don't want to skimp on this part because your future self will really thank you for taking the time and effort to put down a really thick layer of compost and to do this whole process well. It's going to save you a lot of time later on. It's going to eliminate a lot of weeding, and you're going to have much healthier soil and plants. So I highly recommend that you find a good compost and take the time to put it down. This took me maybe 2 hours, but I was bringing the compost pretty far away. So I would say it took me about 2 hours. This is by far the most work you're gonna do for your garden at one time all year. So put in this effort now and you will be really glad later on when it's definitely gonna pay off. So I'll put more information in the blog post about the compost and some tips on how to haul it, where to find it, and the amounts. Again, I'll put in there. But you want to make sure that you have a really nice, good, thick layer of compost, and then have your edge for your weed barrier. And the last thing that we're going to do for this week is I am going to go ahead and just wet everything down one more time to help hold everything in place, especially since we're windy today. And then we're just going to let it sit, and it's going to start to do its thing with suppressing the weeds underneath, feeding the soil, and And next week we're going to go over some things to prepare for planting and maintenance of your garden bed. If you didn't already, you can go ahead and remove your markers on the 4 corners. You don't necessarily need those anymore unless you want to leave them there. But that is it for building your garden bed, and that is it for this week's video. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions or address any challenges that you might have in your specific gardening area. But it really is an easy process, no digging, no tilling, no construction skills necessary. Not that there's anything wrong with those things necessarily, but this is a very simple way to start a garden bed, and that's what I really want to show you. And we are going to continue gardening along, and in future videos we're going to plant this garden space, and we're going to get a lot of food out of this small space. I'm super excited for everything that we're going to harvest. So that is all for this week. Thank you for following along and gardening with me. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, and God bless.